Let's talk more about the situation in Niger. Bring in international relations consultant Dr. Charles Sinkala. Dr. Sinkala, a very good evening to you. Grateful for your time. So ECOWAS says to the coup leaders in Niger, reinstate President Bazoum by the end of Sunday today or face military intervention. What is the likelihood that the coup leaders would even take that seriously at this point?
Thank you very much, Tambekile, for having me, and good evening to your viewers. Look, it's quite not possible for them to hand over the power. It's a complicated matter. And in fact, yes, the ECOWAS has been successful in Gambia, where the ousted Yahya Jammeh refused to hand over the power after the elections, after they intervened. But the tables have changed now that ECOWAS does not have the sophisticated military, complex that can fight the coup leaders who are being funded from outside Niger. And I think they've got interest in terms of the mineral uranium, which has been a fight in that region. But it is surprisingly and very disappointing by the regional bloc to even give coup d'etat leaders 7 days. These coup d'etats should not be accepted or even entertained to negotiate with them.
What then should ECOWAS have done realistically?
ECOWAS should have moved in immediately. They should have mobilized the AU and as well as used the arms of United Nations Security Council, and other partners within the region elsewhere to pounce onto those coup leaders who has kidnapped the president, who was duly elected in the democratic process, use those means. But initiating diplomatic talks, the coup d'etats, the criminals who has ousted the elected president, it is something that they are even accepting, to negotiate with them. So that shows a weakness in their part.
Well, ECOWAS, SADC, the African Union have all been criticized repeatedly for a lackluster, if you will, response in general in moments when there is a threat to security, instability, or even, in fact, in the case in this particular region when there have been hostile takeovers of government, there has been criticism that the response is either too slow or ineffective. So why would there have been any reason to believe that ECOWAS had, shall we say, the guts or the know-how of how to step in a targeted and effective way in Niger to resolve the situation? Because when you consider the build-up to the removal of President Bazoum, it was very clear for at least a day and a half that this was brewing, yet nothing was done.
Definitely, Tambekile, I totally agree with you. Things doesn't happen just all of a sudden. We are aware of what is happening there, and as well as the intervention or escalation rather of military, private military and security companies such as the Wagner Group and others. And as well, we are aware of the forces France fighting their other competitors, who is Russia, in the intervention into those areas. ECOWAS, they are fully aware of what has been happening. And I think this should have been avoided if they had taken steps to make sure that they provide good security, and as well they build up on the military complex that Africa can afford. But it's very difficult for ECOWAS. As you are aware, ECOWAS is not fully funded to take on those operations, or even the AU itself. These coup d'etats are well funded and well planned over a long period of time. That's why you can see that they are not backing, and they've got the backing now from Burkina Faso, Mali, and as well as the other neighboring country, that any escalation to enter into Niger with the military intervention will be chaos, will be the declaration of war for those two countries. And ECOWAS, yes, they are talking, and the AU, they are talking, but that is a soft talk. It's a cold talk. I think they have to go beyond that and institute physical and robust actions in terms of intervention. Yes, the sanctions which they have issued to Niger are not sanctions which are affecting the coup leaders or the complex of coup leaders who planned it. These sanctions, they are actually affecting the ordinary people. And, They have closed now the border in Sokoto, in part of Nigeria, where the most population of Nigerians they stay. So we hope that today is the last day of the ultimatum. Probably ECOWAS have changed or have regrouped, and they had planned for any action should the military juntas never conform for the ultimatum.
So given that the juntas that took power in Mali and Burkina Faso also in the last 12 months have already said that they would see any attack on the coup leaders in Niger as one that affects them as well, would ECOWAS be able to deliver on its threat of military intervention without, for example, the backing of the French or other Western powers, i.e. the Americans?
No, I don't think so, Tambikile. I don't think so. I think ECOWAS is, they can only negotiate at this stage. That's what my view I can understand because of the complex of these military coup d'etats which has been well planned, and Niger calling now the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group, those are mercenaries, and they do nothing but the destruction. And in fact, the ICC report indicated that most of the civil wars in the western part, which has been infected with coup d'etats, especially the last 12 months, we can see that 5 coup d'etats and 2 were successful in Mali. ECOWAS has been grappling, looking for help elsewhere, and I think they must have been initiated by the mercenary Wagner Group. And I think if I go beyond to further that point, Bikila, if you may allow me, the Wagner Group leader, Prigozhin, mentioned that the war now is in Russia, in the invasion in Ukraine is going to an end simply because of other reasons, and they commanded these people that now they must look at towards Africa. And I think we're not surprised that this issue has happened last week.
Just on that then, there's a growing anti-French sentiment in former colonies such as Niger, right, where even in the demonstrations in support of the coup leaders in Niger, for example, people who wanted President Bazoum gone because of what they say was a failure to address long-standing economic challenges as well as a failing security situation, we're seeing that rise in anti-French sentiment as a former colonial power, but also a rise in support for the Russians. And the Wagner Group, as we know, is a proxy of the Russian government and will fight battles in parts of that region, as it has done, in fact, helping Russian soldiers to fight the Ukrainians since February last year. What is Russia's future role in Africa more broadly, and what is behind this increased interest or support for Russian presence in these countries such as Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso?
Well, Tambikile, it's a complicated question, and that you've posed, and it's very interesting at the same time. We have to differentiate between the Wagner Group and Russia itself, but there is a very fine line, as you are aware. Prigozhin and the Wagner Group was formed by President Putin, who's been very close to him to carry out that military contractors role in terms of the Wagner Group, because what they usually do into these countries in West Africa, most of them have run out of budgets to provide security for themselves. They contract military contractors whom they actually give the mineral worth that you shall mine and take over whatever the minerals for them to pay them back. And there's been a scramble really between Russia and France, to take the territory. It is very difficult now to say, yes, they're saying they're going back to Russia, but France has been there for over 60 years, and in fact, even beyond that, as the former colony, and they've been mining uranium and other minerals, and also the complexity of how the French government takes those former colonies into, according to their 1957 agreement, that their worth must be banked into the treasury in France. It's quite a complicated story. Our only hope that people of Niger and West Africa should look beyond turning against their elected leaders. And I think they must find a solution and realize that they are being used as pawn to run against their elected government, simply because President Muhammad was actually trying to, to move away from the domination and the intervention by the West, especially France.
Charles Sinkala, thank you so much for your time on News at Prime tonight.